When we started this project 10 some years ago, I don't think in our wildest imagination we could have dreamed that within the first year of opening, we'd be affiliated with the Smithsonian. We're deeply honored. We take this honor with a lot of humility, but we know the responsibility that we have to live up to your standards. We will do our best. So we look forward to working with you and your associates at the museum so we can show through arts, science, and culture of the American West, past, present, and future. And we just couldn't be any more pleased with this designation with our museum. We thank you for coming. We thank you for honoring our museum today. With that, now I'd like to introduce who will speak on behalf of the city, the Vice Mayor, in charge of all vice, David Smith, the Honorable David Smith, City Councilman. David?
You're not going to let me read from your notes?
You probably couldn't read my notes.
Well, thank all of you for being here. Speaking on behalf of the city, we are most excited to welcome the Smithsonian to our city in an official way. Excited for our citizens, excited for this institution. I would say briefly there are parallels between the Smithsonian and this institution that we're in today. The Smithsonian, as you know, was begun from a bequest by James Smithson, a British engineer who died in 1829. And it took our federal government almost 20 years to finally turn his bequest into an actual institution. In 1846, the Smithsonian was officially born, and in 1847, what we all know as the Smithsonian, the castle on the mall, was built. This institution, for many of you involved in it, certainly Paul, Messenger, and others, it had a longer incubation period than that. 30 years, sometimes we say 40 years, whatever the number is, but we rejoice the fact that it's here, and we rejoice in this partnership with the Smithsonian. It is also remarkable that our institution is now joining one of the oldest institutions of learning and diffusion of knowledge, along with 168, I guess the number is, of affiliate museums throughout the United States, Panama, and Puerto Rico. And I think the challenge now for us, once this partnership is solidified, is that Mike Fox and the team here have to go to Washington and search through more than 150 million artifacts and find what's appropriate to bring here for Scottsdale display. But we look forward to that challenge, the opportunity. Again, we welcome you to the city. We are pleased you're here. And if there's anything that on behalf of the city that we can do to make this affiliation even more meaningful, we look forward to doing so. Thank you again.
Thank you, David. Our next speaker has credentials as long as your arm. I'm not sure where to start, where to stop, but just a couple highlights. She was a U.S. ambassador to Finland. She is a regent of the Smithsonian and co-chair of the Capital Campaign. A couple things you might not know. My understanding is she has landed a jet plane on an aircraft carrier in the ocean while it was bobbing up and down. And she and her husband operate what is called the Triple Creek Ranch Lodge in Darby, Montana, which is ranked as one of the top lodges in the world for its size. My wife and I had the pleasure of being up there this last summer, and I will tell you it is first class. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce Ambassador Barbara Barrett.
Thank you, Jim. Ladies and gentlemen, you're in for a treat. First, it's a treat because congratulations on the Scottsdale Museum of the West being welcomed into the family of the Smithsonian affiliates, a group that counts 200, nearly 200 at this point, but probably the youngest ever to have that affiliation. The Smithsonian, as the Vice Mayor said, has a long history, and we're going to hear, I hope, a bit about that from the man I'm about to introduce. Richard Kurin is the Provost-elect and Undersecretary for History, Arts, and Culture for the entire Smithsonian. Now, he deserves that job for a number of reasons, but one, just out of tenacity. This man first joined the Smithsonian to celebrate America's bicentennial. 4 decades of time has seen Richard Kurin at the Smithsonian in a variety of roles. Trained as an anthropologist, it just might be that the culture of the American West is something that he would have an interest in, and the development of this museum would be a great place to start with that. Richard is a leader that is well respected at the Smithsonian. He's in the number 2 role. He is a guy who has led history, arts, and culture, but also science and nature and all of the rest of that extraordinary institution. Unlike any other in the world, the Smithsonian Institution, established now well over 150 years ago, and an organization that I think will help make Scottsdale even better, if that's possible, Mr. Vice Mayor. If that's possible, Scottsdale will be even better with the affiliation that is being announced today. Ladies and gentlemen, would you join me in welcoming the Dr. Richard Caron from the Smithsonian Institution. Richard.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Jim. Mike and Tricia, thank you for taking me on a wonderful tour. And to you, Vice Mayor Smith, thanks for the wonderful weather and the beautiful view I had this morning. This is an extraordinary place, and it's no surprise to me that Scottsdale is regarded as one of the most livable places on the planet, and you have my vote. The Smithsonian affiliates, and I'd also like to recognize my colleagues here, my bosses. Sometimes Barbara said, like I'm in charge. Really? I do what I'm told. And so I do what I'm told because of Jenny Clark, the Assistant Secretary of Advancement at the Smithsonian, and Gay Ray, a resident here who was the former chair of the Smithsonian National Board. So it's a pleasure to greet you today. It was wonderful going through the museum, recognizing various items that really define the heart of how we became the United States. When you look at the U.S. behind, nobody thought in the early days, and remember, Thomas Jefferson wasn't sure about acquiring the Louisiana Purchase and everything else, to realize the breadth of our country and the sea to shining sea that our country's become as a result. So it really is the West. Now, we have a small artifact at the Smithsonian that kind of charts that out. It cost $5. And it was Lewis and Clark went on the advice of Thomas Jefferson up to Philadelphia and bought this compass for $5. Beautiful mahogany wood, and that's the compass that charted their course across the West and back, and ended up mapping our country and making it what it is. So we're very happy about that artifact. You could try borrowing. Where's Mike? Yeah, you can try getting that one. As we're going through the collection, I marvel at stuff because, one of the purposes of the affiliates is that we have millions and millions, over 130 million objects within the institution. And one of the ideas of the affiliates are to loan those objects to our affiliate museums so they can get out from the storage cases and out from the warehouse so they can be seen by the American public, because the Smithsonian and everything in it belong to the American people, belong to all of us. And so the idea is to get them out to these museums. So as we were going through, I saw some of the photographs, I guess up in the Peterson collection there. It's marvelous to have a wonderful collector and supports the museum like that, to see those Curtis photographs. And one of them in particular caught my fancy because it was an old photo of Chief Joseph. And I have a photo of that in my office. Chief Joseph was being recorded by Smithsonian anthropologists in about 1910, 1911, in front of that Smithsonian castle on the Mall. Here was a chief visiting Washington and recording his tales of his tribe and of the West. And I keep that in my office. We also looked at some of the Catlins in that Catlin in that collection. I gave Mike some advice if he wants to try to borrow a few Catlins. Catlin painted those wonderful paintings. Many of those paintings, repainted them actually, because he painted and then he lost them in poker, some paid bills for, and lost a few in fires and stuff. But he actually, in the later years of his life, painted many of his pictures up in the bell tower of the Smithsonian Castle. So we have about 500 or 600 Catlins. It still remains the largest exhibit that's ever traveled, largest American exhibit that's ever been shown in the Louvre in France. And so I think, the Louvre in France has nothing over the museum here, and those paintings should come here. But this is you can only imagine for children, school children, and others coming here, the cowboy artists that were here a little bit ago, for people to come in and get a sense of what the West was about. Now I'm a city guy, New York City. And so, for me, the West is always something in the imagination. And the idea of being able to glimpse the West as people in the West see it through the eyes of artists, see it through the eyes of people who lived it, that has to be inspiring for children. We don't want people to forget. We don't want to get people to forget where they live, where they came from, and what made this country. So I really look forward to the relationship between the museum and the Smithsonian. And in addition to borrowing items, artifacts, we also send full exhibitions, and I hope the museum takes full advantage of that. We do training programs for staff. And there's also an instructive thing that the museum, it's not just a one-way street where the Smithsonian would send things to Scottsdale. So there's lessons that will come out of here that have parallel lessons or can even instruct the Smithsonian. It was marvelous going through. There's a stuffed bison over there next to the exhibit by Will James. And it's great to see his depiction. Now here was a cowboy. So he was able to, understand the movements of horses and animals and depict that in his art. And at the Smithsonian, again, think back east, 100 years ago, a little more than 100 years ago, we had this taxidermist at the Smithsonian. Taxidermist. William Hornaday. We had buffalo skins at the Smithsonian, tons of them, because buffalo were hunted. But we didn't know what they looked like because nobody back east had ever seen a buffalo. So he goes out west, I think it's 1882, 1883, he's looking for buffalo, couldn't find them, goes out later in the fall, finally finds a few buffalo. He watches them, he observes them. You could see him doing just like, what this guy Will James is doing. He doesn't have the heart to shoot the buffalo. He ends up bringing them back to Washington. Brings back 4 buffalo, including a young one named Sandy. Okay, you bring back these buffalo to Washington, what are you going to do with them? Well, we need to pen them in. We put them on the mall outside that Smithsonian Castle. All of a sudden, the people in Washington say, wow, look at these creatures. These are majestic. This is great. It teaches us about, the heritage of the West, about what was here, what we're becoming as a country. And then people say, well, are you going to get more animals? And all of a sudden, the Smithsonian becomes like Noah's Ark. That was the beginning of the National Zoo of the United States. And what happened, that guy Hornaday, who was a taxidermist, who was stuffing animals, ended up hooking up with a guy named Teddy Roosevelt, ended up founding the Bronx Zoo, and really starting the conservation movement in this country. So from taxidermy to conservation. What a journey of our country, and what a personal journey. And so, when I was looking at those Will James's paintings over there, and of course it was right next to the stuffed buffalo, you can't help getting the fact that the stories that this museum is going to deal with, the stories the Smithsonian deal with, and if we can mesh the two, it can really be more powerful for both institutions. So we look forward to this partnership. You have an amazing, wonderful building, a beautiful building. I know it's supposed to be a Western garden out here. To me, it's almost like Japanese Zen garden meets the West. It's very contemplative, very contemplative. Weeping Wall, very beautiful. So I hope they'll let me spend a lot more time here coming back, but I know my colleagues across the Smithsonian are really anxious to do it, to forge partnerships, and whether it be through the American History Program and looking at the history of the West, through our American Indian Program, through our American Art Museum, or even our Portrait Gallery or other institutions at the Smithsonian, you have a lot of friends and you have a lot of partners at the Smithsonian, and we're proud to join with you. So we have this is the kind of official part of the program. So this is a Smithsonian Certificate of Affiliation, and the affiliations go through the Board of Regents. Barbara Barrett is a member of that, and the Secretary of the Smithsonian, who unfortunately could not be here today. He had a family emergency, but he really wanted to be here today. It's my good fortune to be here in his stead. But the Board of Regents of the Smithsonian, the Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, are pleased to recognize Western Spirit, Scottsdale's Museum of the West, as an affiliate of the Smithsonian Institution, dated today, November 20th, 2015, signed by David Scorton. And I think Barbara's right. I think it becomes the earliest, the quickest pathway to an affiliate museum we've ever had. Congratulations, Jim.
Thank you very much.